There is always something, refuses summary. A poet claims the pedestrians below define the season. It will be early May, years abandoned to nostalgia, as everything repeats itself in uncertainty, wildflowers and soil beneath needles of woodland. City waiters brush crumbs table to floor. Why clean twice? Toss pails of water from entrances at daybreak, sweep the wet pavement. In a dirge, he asks if the deified look down from cypresses, scorned or shot in the upheaval of dictators. Why not recite, scissored between languages, or question a young olive's silver undersides? In the prologue, they meet at a crossing of grace, linger in a previous life. Impervious to appeals, the anima a man cannot tame, nor his ultimate view. In a future tense, he murmurs the pet name for the beauty marks at the nape of her neck. Vistas Barcelona, a poem by our guest tonight, Alicia Askanase. Uh, so, welcome to Philly Loves Poetry. Uh, the focus of our program, my name, of course, is Charles Carr. The focus of our program is to give our viewers and our listeners the experience of the very rich culture of poetry in the city of Philadelphia and the surrounding area. Uh, so tonight we have a familiar guest to me because I've known Alicia in the poetry community for some time, and in fact, I have shared workshop sessions with her for several years, maybe 8 or 9 years. So I'm very, very familiar with Alicia's work, which is very exciting. Alicia is the author of chapbooks, Suspect, Cover, The Luxury of Pathos, and Shirley Shirley. Her full-length manuscript, How to Say It, is seeking print or publisher. She told me what that meant. She was a founding co-editor of the literary journal Six and director of the Walt Whitman Art Center literary programs for many years. She has taught English as a second language in Puerto Rico, Spain, New York, and finally Philadelphia. Alicia considers herself a Spanish, and she'll explain that. And yes, there is such a thing. Alicia's poetry has appeared in several anthologies, new works by Philadelphia poets, and poems for the writing, prompts for poets and lit journals, among them Chain, The World, Feminist Studies, the Manhattanville Review, Patterson Literary Review, and the Painted Bride Quarterly. So, welcome, Alicia. It's great to have you. On Philly Loves Poetry, finally. So I wanted to just start our conversation just with a general reaction after reading your collection of poems, which are really remarkable. Your collection of poems in the current reality in which we are living, at least I'm living, you're living, and I had this feeling when I reread it. I said, that's a very destabilizing kind of sensation, these poems, and I mean that in the best kind of way. And I've felt that in some workshops. I said, Alicia gives you a little more where you feel a little bit unsettled about language, but that's the interesting part about it. And I said to myself, well, this is the world we're living in, Charles. Very unstable, very unbalanced, and especially unbalanced and destabilized as far as language goes. So can you respond to that? Do you have that kind of feeling when you're creating how the world, especially this world right now, is pinching in on your writing of poems?
I think it has, and I think in my more recent work, even topics that are occurring, and themes that are occurring in our country. In terms of the sort of distortion or sense of imbalance, I that's not intentional. I think we talked about the fact that I write with non sequiturs, and that's something that is sort of new for me. Although I think I've been writing in sort of somewhat language poetry influenced style since I went to graduate school at Temple many years ago and studied with Rachel Blau Duplessis. And I ran a literary series at the Walt Whitman Center for very many years and invited many of those writers. So there is something about language poetry that is disjunctive and unpredictable. I mean, there's a reason for that. And so at that time in my life, I was writing more experimentally. And after that, I think in the last 10 years, to me, my work is a little bit more conventional, a little bit more approachable, comprehensible, But yes, I think the answer is yes. And that recently, a lot of my poems, which I can read a few of, definitely deal with what's happening in the last 5, even 10 years. It's been 10 years of, terror, you might say. So I guess the answer is yes.
Yeah, and when we go back to the poem that I read, which is, I think, a great example of what I'm talking about, and it's very interesting. This is I guess, translated into English as view, and there's that's what this is about. When we see, this as you build this poem, this is Barcelona, and how it, the variations it starts with. So interesting. Like in the second stanza, we move from waiters brushing crumbs from a table to the deified, and ending with upheaval of dictators. And we ask ourselves, how and why did we get here? I mean, in the poem, this aspect of the description is prevalent throughout. You're describing a very different here and elsewhere. So it talks about these shifts and how you accomplish them. And I don't want to say the purpose, because I don't feel you're trying to strike a purpose necessarily for your reader. You have a purpose for yourself in these poems, and it's very evident.
Well, I would say when I'm writing in this way and moving from subjects so quickly or irrationally, let's say, from sweeping and tossing pails of water from entrances of little shops in Spain or restaurants to the deified and dictators, I think that's the way my mind works. I'm in one part I'm creating this image of something that I have seen that's really amazing to me, that you won't bother. You just brush the crumbs off onto the floor, then you sweep it out, and then people still throw buckets of water and wash the pavement in front of their stores. So to me, that's something so beautiful and so old-fashioned. But also the history in Spain and where we may be heading now in the United States is this, well, are these people gods? And where are we going? Are we scorned? Are we going to be shot in the upheaval of dictators? Which also reminds me, of course, of Spain. When I went there first to live, he had just died. Franco had just died. So I can't necessarily explain to you how this happens. It just things that I'm reading. Also, I was influenced by a poet in Spain and maybe stealing a few ideas, but I was thinking when you asked me about the third stanza, why not recite scissored between languages or question a young olive's silver undersides? That follows this upheaval of dictators. Like it is asking why don't we do something else, something beautiful, like recite, and then I realized just today that the scissored between languages and the olive silver undersides it's two-sided. It's the two languages are scissored between them, but also the olive is darker green, the top of the leaf, but paler green underneath, well, almost a white. And I had been in Barcelona before I wrote this, and I'll tell you, I saw this unbelievable olive tree in the city that was, it was just stunning to me. So images and moments stay with me in terms of that. So I'm not trying to confuse a reader,
Right.
but I also think that this is how the mind works, or at least mine does.
Right.
It just from here to there, and it doesn't mean that I don't work on them and
Right.
revise them, but yeah.
In so, and you said it that you kind of grew up in the language poetry, the genre of language poetry,
Right.
and there's a lot of great poets that are in that school. I mean, Ray Almontrout is one, Stillman, Charles Bernstein, and others who are very noted poets. Can you tell our audience what distinguishes, from your perspective, what when we call in that genre language poetry?
Well, for me, and when I was studying at Temple, and there were people that worked there, that taught there, that were part of the language poetry movement, and so my friends, my colleagues were also writing in that mode. I don't think that there's one single definition of language poetry.
Right.
The title comes from the title of a journal that they created,
right.
the L equals A, and that included Bernstein and several other writers.
Right.
And I think some of the things they shared in common was that they were sort of wanted to break the status quo of what, American lyrical poetry, or what I read someone called the voice, that there isn't just one voice.
Right.
And also there's a kind of rebellion against the bourgeois, and very theoretical and academic perspective on language, and what these writers, who also write very differently from each other, were aiming for, what they were rebelling against, and thus creating. It's avant-garde. There's always been avant-gardes.
Right.
So I think I was reading that the language movement was probably the largest one in American poetics since, Bob Creeley and what was it? The Black Mountain School. Okay, so all of those different periods, whether it was in the United States or other countries, there have been these movements. So when I did write experimentally, that's what I also called it, experimental poetry, while I was there and afterwards. And I have to say, I really do like that writing. I probably have a book length, batch of poems. But eventually, and I'd like to quote someone, which I think is a really interesting way of looking at why you might not write language poetry. And it's this poet named Michael Palmer. And he was part of the group, but he describes, he calls it poetics and theoretical escape from the assumption of poetic production. So it's like consumer, it's what we're all going to read. And a reader participation in meaning, a tendency to avoid closure. Like, we're not going to end in a place that's aha. It's going to be more open, and that the reader will participate more in reading the poem, in understanding it. But when he decided it wasn't working for him as much, and he says that his own hesitancy comes from when you try to create a fixed theoretical matrix and begin to work from an ideology of prohibitions about expressivity and the self, which is which we do in a non-experimental way. We're writing about the self, we're expressing ourselves. And this was, so he didn't really like those kinds of restrictions. And so he departed, he said, quite dramatically from a few of the language poets.
Yeah, and language poetry was kind of born in a period of political turmoil. I mean, with Vietnam, post-Vietnam.
Yes.
And so, you use the word resistance, and you've reused the word resistance, several times in poetry. And one feels that, as as a key feature of, it's not only resistance in the political sense, but you said, kind of a resistance to the standard, what passes for poetry. And interesting that you said about, well, we're not interested in closure. It's not a formula necessarily that A plus B plus C equals something. It stands by itself on its own. It's interesting, as I was reading just the other day, my wife and I were watching a special on Picasso, okay? And I said to myself, how did he pull this off? I mean, because he completely went against the structure of art, and he turned art on its head, but he succeeded so profoundly.
Yes.
And became a legacy. And I said, well, this is what you have when you go into a specific new experimental, challenging venue of poetry or art. And you just let it settle and go with it. And that's that's what I experienced. When I see you, do you see yourself as a experimenter with language? Would you call yourself an experimenter with language?
Well, perhaps. I mean, what does it mean to experiment? I mean, we're all experimenting when we're writing. But I think that I play with language. I'm also very interested in the etymology of words. I think words are fascinating, which is also why, if you know other languages, for example, the Romance languages, I'm always drawn back to the root, as you said, vista. And for me, vista then leads to vision. And we're not all visionaries, but we do, in a way, when we write, we are visionaries. We're seeing something, or we're putting down what we see, which we hope others have seen, or maybe not have seen. So I guess, yes, I experiment in my own way. And I write differently now than I did even 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So I think if your work evolves, hopefully it evolves, yeah.
Yeah, and this collection, I don't know what the time frame is for this, but I came to the end of the poems, maybe 5 of them, very different feel in terms of the first set of poems. Number one in length, I felt. I'm not saying that, and it's an overused word, accessibility, but there was a certain framework that I felt that had changed, not radically, but it had changed in those maybe last 4 or 5 poems. And I guess I'm talking. Let me just go back to what I might be talking about. Like Yes, the poem Yes, which I really loved. The small hours. Monday morning, especially this last one. Let me see. I think might have been the very last one. Yes. Open reading to follow. I really love that. I really love that. But so what I felt, or what I see, and I see it, it's not only in this collection, but I see it, when we discuss these things in workshop, is you're not afraid to kind of fracture what's called the structure of a sentence, subject, predicate, object, and toss it around a bit and make predicates out of subjects and nouns, or vice versa. And is that deliberate?
Until you're asking me this, I really haven't thought about it very much. I'm not, I write, and I think that I'm not really going anywhere at first. Maybe there's a premise, but then I'm not sure where poems will go.
Yeah.
What I wanted to say, though, but these poems are from very different, they're from
Right.
different times.
Okay.
So For example, Open Reading to Follow is a humorous poem. I probably wrote it 5 years ago.
Uh-huh.
All right, but they're one of some of my greatest hits, you know. But one of the things that has changed is how I write, and that is as I get older and I don't want to type, and I've started to dictate. So I will just have notes, ideas, things that I might see, and before I'm going to write a poem, I'll just dictate 3 pages.
Right.
It's a strange process, but and then I'll type it, or I'll print it, then I'll look at it and I'll just highlight the lines I like, the words I like. And then the next step is, you know, paring down and placing things maybe next to each other. It's not, I mean, I try to make it comprehensible, but it's this new process for me. So it's a little bit like a collage.
Right.
Like I'm not aiming for perfect sense, although I do think I have a pretty good structure of, you know, predicate, what is it? Predicate, verb, I don't know. Predicate
Subject,
is the verb.
predicate, object.
Object, right. The object might come first sometimes. So
Yeah.
I was pretty good at grammar and language. I
Right.
mean, teaching ESL, you really have to know grammar. Actually, it taught me grammar just by teaching it. But anyway, so I hope I've answered your question, Charles.
Yeah. The other part of that, and going looking at, is that in your poems, you don't feel, or what I see, you don't have an impression that every stanza has to kind of connect and flow. In fact, it doesn't, and it's very flowing, but flowing in that kind of unstable, unbalanced way that's unique, I think, to that school of poetry. Is they don't feel, oh, I have to build a little house or build something with blocks so that people, you know, will see how organized and so how symmetrical it is. And yours, it's not. Can you talk about that structuring of a structuring of your stanzas and how you move sometimes from, and you have some very long numbered poems and then much shorter.
I can't say it's a conscious effort or am I writing like language poetry? Does it come from that? Because also, I have to say about language poetry, I don't know that much about it, but it isn't just one thing. Like they might build on something. But also, when I do that, I'm not like the one, what was the poem with the non sequiturs, The Aroused. You can see in that poem that there are some connections, but not right one after the other. Like a theme might be repeated.
Right.
Or, you know, so I'm not worried. When I'm doing that, I'm not that worried about the reader. I write for myself primarily, and I hope that people will enjoy it. But I can't say there's definitely a method to it. But also, I've had people comment on that. I mean, it can be enjoyable at the same time. We don't think always that way either. We don't think, in a straight narrative. I know I certainly don't.
Right. You know, I say to myself, because I've gone to a number of art shows, painting and sculpture, and I say, we don't demand structure necessarily when we look at a great painting. We don't demand it. We all have our own eye for it, and our eyes make that sense that we like and enjoy and immerse ourselves in. But it's not necessarily logical. It's not necessarily saying, God, I can see what the artist was trying to tell me. And so in art, it's not like, well, at least modern art, I don't feel that I need to know what the artist is trying to tell me. It's like I need to feel what I'm trying to tell myself as I'm looking at that and experiencing that. So why don't we do the same thing with poetry? And I only say to share that experience because that's, having experienced your poetry in this collection, I said to myself, is that why would you have a different standard for looking at a painting and reading a poem in the modern era. You shouldn't. And it should be able to, in a way, stand on its own and speak to you in whatever way you want. So, and I think you said even before we start, you don't put a bow necessarily at the end of a poem. So here it is. Here's our little gift to you, and you sometimes just leave us, and that, that's, yeah, it's startling, but it's very interesting the way you do that.
Well, perhaps what I said earlier about language poetry, where the reader is more involved, and that the last line is somehow connected to the rest of the lines.
Right.
And but also, as you were talking about modern art, I mean, we write modern poetry, contemporary poetry, which I see is changing very much. I mean, my work would not be published by a lot of the journals or the online, that it might have been that I'm losing my thought there, but that my work is not even very modern anymore. It's really pretty understandable. But yeah, I don't, it's like with modern art, I was thinking when you mentioned Picasso, I went to the Picasso Museum last year in Barcelona, and it was amazing to see his early work and then the gradual progression of his work. Like his ability to paint something like mountains, or he has this gorgeous painting of a First Holy Communion. It's perfect, gorgeous.
Yes.
Mimetic art. And then, over time, he evolves. Who knows? And I think artists then were experimenting with different things like cubism, and they were, of course, influencing each other. But I think maybe perhaps that's what's happening with my work in some ways.
Yeah.
And the poem that you read about vistas, to me, it makes perfect sense. So I don't know, it just makes sense to me. But maybe also because these are my life experiences, or, things that I've read or seen.
Absolutely. It's interesting you bring up that one painting in the First Communion, because that really hung on me when I saw it. I said, it's so exquisite. It's so exquisitely, traditional and so beautifully done. And then you switch to these other representations of, and even his representations of some of the great Spanish masters, that very, very contorted. But that one, I really, being, I was raised in the Catholic Church and received First Communion and all that. So, but I said, geez, that's such a exquisite representation of that moment of that young woman, that little girl receiving her First Communion, and how he did the veil and everything. I said, the detail in that is really amazing. The other thing about your poem, and I think it's unique to you, is your humor. And the poem, and I don't know if you're going to read it, about a few things and about your two, or I don't know if they're your two hands or somebody's two hands. That is, some of your poems are absolutely hilarious.
Yes.
And I can remember being at Fergie's for a reading of yours. I think it was yours. And you really did a riff on Trump back in the first term. And the place was coming apart. I mean, I didn't see it necessarily in this collection. Maybe it's there, but it was absolutely hilarious. So there is this, but the humor, there's a seriousness to the humor too. So can you talk about your use of that in your poems?
Well, I have to say that to me, well, first of all, I think I was born funny, but also my father was very witty, and my mother was serious, but my father was very funny, and I have this in one of my poems about how when I was young, when I was in 8th grade, I was voted class clown, and my father was very upset. He probably knew that it was for attention, but by the same token, he said to me, "You can be witty, but I don't want you to be a clown. All right. So there is a difference. But to me, laughing is one of the greatest things in the world. I love to watch, listen, see things that are funny. And as people have said, well, you've got pretty good timing. You know, even when I'm speaking to people, I can be kind of funny, you know. So of course it's in my work. How could
Yeah.
it not be in my work?
Right. Right.
And also, one of the things I wanted to say was that when I was younger, you know, I went to university, I was studying to be an English teacher, and at some point I wanted to change my major to acting, but I was discouraged by the acting professor. And so in a way, I still do that. I do it in the writing and I do it when I read them. So it is a kind of performance.
Now, I'm hoping and that you have this collection published because it's a wonderful collection, and I think it's a great representation. I don't want to say it's a great representation of language poetry, but it's a great representation of your approach to poetry. And so if somebody said, "Well, how did Alicia write?" Well, I mean, what's about? And I said, "Well, read the collection, okay?" And I don't think you have to come away with, oh, let me give some type of definitive synopsis of this. How did it feel? How did these poems, feel in you? And it's just like I say, looking at a piece of art, how does it speak to you? How does it feel to you? And so we're at that time also, and this has been a great discussion with you, Alicia. I love it. I wish we had more time. But people want to hear you read your poems. And so I'm going to turn the mic over to you and let you read your poems and take it away.
Okay. So I made up a table of contents today so I could actually find my poems. And I have some underlined. So I'm going to go to page 3. Well, yeah, page 3, which is, excuse me. Oh, it's very early on. It's the homage to September. When they gutted the pesticide factory, digging out a line of mature lilacs, leaving them for dead, I would gladly have taken a few. I cannot forget you. Shooting photos with a real camera, me leaning against the building. You left an empty chair. At the police station, I have the urge to key their SUVs, as if they were going to find my phone. Everyone who had their wallet stolen over the weekend is here on Monday. Kneecap as a verb, slingbacks, lapdogs, seltzer delivery, the man with the Hershey bar nodding out. I fill out the hopeless papers. The city traffic moving itself between semaphores. Hood deep under a car, a mechanic is thinking about lunch. Above the garage, ovate leaves. The mechanic rolls back and pulls himself up. It is the first day of September. I had a virgin once. We are listening to ABBA and waiting for Mother to leave. I am wearing a pajama top, jeans, and my lips are chapped. Okay, so obviously I'm going in different directions here. But I thought about this poem, and really, it's all about September. It's different things that might be happening on different days, but everything is in September, which is a favorite month of mine. Let me see. I'm going to do a little humor, so I'm going to do Egypt, which also has pathos in it, okay? So, and you saw in my bio that I was waiting for Prince, yes. Either Prince or some publisher to take my book. And I'm just a big fan of Prince, and he just sort of charms me. I love his music. I think he's a genius. So if you're talking about geniuses, Egypt. 1. Like Prince, I swallowed too many pills I was informed were for my sinus infection, and they called it accidental. I hadn't met the doctor yet who would prescribe them. He was young, and I knew that neither I nor my septum were deviated. How could I describe how everything hurt in the online form? I was also bounced off Century 21. my last day on earth, then transferred to a man whose voice was vague, who chuckled from a great distance. The bathing suit wouldn't have fit. Anyway, who was I kidding? I was svelte. It's not easy being dead. My brother and parents are here. I will not speak to them. The doctor feels guilty for treating me like a headache. I hope my passing doesn't affect his practice. In my final moments, I was thrilled the copay was only $30 in network. Still, did I need fentanyl for congestion and shortness of breath? I had written poetry, but not Purple Rain. 2. Soon as I saw Prince, I knew I'd found my soul mate. He's weirdly reticent, but he likes the ladies, and his hip is all better because we're in heaven. When I told Prince that I'd dressed up as Prince for Halloween twice, he smiled demurely and played me some awesome licks. We text each other from the same room about his death, a lot like my brother's. The thing is, no one cares about such things here. It's all crossing a long river, like little Moseses. Okay, just gonna, all right, here is, I'm gonna read page 12, which is called Stubborn Reality. And this definitely has to do with our current reality. And there is an epigraph, Stubborn Reality, know where you stand and stand there, Daniel Berrigan. Curled huskies waiting on snowy ice for the fisherman to finish his catch. A man returns from hunting, rifle over his shoulder, almost too handsome to look at. Late Arctic light across the inlet. 2. Sometimes the power goes out. Sometimes it comes back on. Like a dog, if you pet it, you get the belly up. If you don't, it growls. Remember to turn out the lights when they come. Don't give them the dog. Shoot him if you have to, but don't give them the dog.
I just want to go back to that epigraph. You know, that is so much you. Berrigan's, know where you stand and stand there. And so, I mean, that is, it's short, but it's very powerful. It's interesting that you selected that epigraph. Where is it from?
I don't know.
You just saw it. And, yeah, I think it's very powerful.
Yeah, I really, really liked it. I like what it means politically.
Yeah.
And also in your life, whatever it is, stand by yourself.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to be yourself.
Yeah.
And to stand by your morals and your ethics. And I just wanted to mention, first of all, the first stanza about the huskies and the Arctic, that's really an ekphrastic based on a photograph of Iceland, people in Iceland or Greenland. Okay, Greenland. So, as you know, we are trying to take over Greenland. And so that's what I'm describing, how beautiful it is. And it is amazing. These were photographs. I get the Atlantic, and every week they have photos of the week that are just stunning. Mm-hmm. So that's the visual part of my interest too. And it's also very sound oriented. And then the second stanza is sort of, it's about when this goes down, when the power goes out, it might work, it might not. But if they come, don't give them the dog. Whatever you do, just shoot the dog if you have to, which is really awful. And that could refer to something else that's currently going on, which I didn't mean. But anyway, yeah. So.
Well, speaking of Greenland, I don't know if you saw, there's a reel that circulated that when essentially Speaker of the House of the Danish Parliament shared that our esteemed president wanted to buy Greenland, there was just an uproarious laugh throughout the chamber, and it did not stop. And I'm glad they took it like that, and as something humorous.
It's absurd.
Yeah.
How could you not? unfortunately, I mean, I don't think he'll ever be able to take over Greenland, but he wants to. He has said, but we know that this person has said so many things that everything that he says is a lie or some fabrication that he can't act on, although some of them he does. Yeah, I think it is kind of funny. But it's dark. This is also very dark,
Yeah.
you know? Okay, let me see. Okay, I read that. I'm going to read, I think I'll read, let me know if I have enough time. I'm supposed to be looking at that camera. So I'm going to read one of the ones we discussed a little bit, or with a lot of non sequiturs, which is The Aroused, January 6, 2021. So the reference, of course, is to, you know, the near coup d'etat of our government, which was never resolved. No one was ever punished, and the people who were involved in it, except for the higher-ups, were pardoned. The higher-ups would pardon themselves anyway. So, The Aroused. 1. We knew time had come around, panic in its footfall. From a walk-in closet, I prayed to 3 stolen reliquary fingers. 2. By the by, happy anniversary from the stairs. Clink of flat Prosecco. Fist pumps evaporate from the footage. On the last day, the subways flooded. Lowercase letters marched across pink Mexican tiles, and the house sold for several bullion. 4. Your aunt lives in my building. There was a condo takeover. Have you seen her lately? 5. Military helicopters rattle the breakfast dishes. 6. Despots were on lockdown at your old job, Jack, at The Hague. Dream was vague like the coriander on the hills of Odessa. 7. The trees are dormant, yet roots will gossip. I wish this shitty winter would end, and so forth. 8. Slipstack Marx Brothers lift their legs over the arms of tall, largish women, usually the hostess. 9. The influencer has yet to speak a heartfelt message. 10. The news arrives from distant roofers, hammering a tap dance. Do you want me to explain anything there, Charles? Anyway, it's serious and it's a little bit funny. Let's see, what should I do next? Okay, I'd like to read a newer poem, which I actually read the other night at the open reading at Fergie's, Natalie Anderson and 2 other people, J.D. Earhart, I think his name is, and I'll think of the third person in a moment. So this, I will just tell you the how this poem came about, and it's one of the ways I write. I just kept the list of different muses, and it was in a notebook. And then, for some reason, I was writing again. It's really about today, and somehow I saw the list and I came up with this. So, I've also taken out one line. The muse of exceptionalism. Since the footloose muse twisted his ankle, the socialist muse is imprisoned. The muse of spells and charms, far too charming. The muse of the occult left after the hallowed eve. The hostile takeover muse is working for the Beelzebub. Trickster muse is up to his tricks, playing a sad oboe. The beguiling muse will distract me from my work. The humble muse is too kind for these times. The flying muse took off when he could. The risk-taker muse is on a skateboard on a railing by the train tracks. The flight risk muse zigzags his way by the authorities he befriends. And several unqualified, the return flight muse is the resting pilot by the emergency door. And several unqualified strangers have pledged to save the airplane, flying over land, the first in the lifeboat down the inflated slide, on their phones and look up as the big bird goes down. The muse of the fascists, need I say more? The muse of the universe is at a photo shoot by the Webb telescope. Micromuse sits at my feet in his little mouse booties complaining about the cold. The reliable muse caught in a glam shot watching me from a bookcase. The miniskirt muse, once passé, has returned shorter and pricier. The unreliable muse, you guessed it, is on a bender. The mendacious and jittery muse was re-elected. The muse of the expat is exactly where I want to be. Au revoir. The sorceress of your capital muse claims to be the muse of the universe, wearing science as an adornment, a still figure in snow globe amid the blizzard, and for sale. The abandoned muse assists in reviving the muse of the absurd. I'm going to take a sip. What better sight than the suburbs, where one gets lost in ubiquity, where the pool shop once stood, now a Dunkin' Donuts, and one is winding down a main artery in a car, beloved car, at 50 miles per hour, waiting for the gas station landmark, now owned by a different bunch of petrol moguls. And without a phone, no GPS, must stop at a lonely, doomed dollar store where the staff is so kind, all of us entering a postmodern falling off, speaking in the American idiom and landscape, hold on tight, baby. Okay. I'll read a short one. It's Incoming Prayer, page 24. This was definitely from a prompt. We studied together in Leonard Gontaric's workshop. So the title, I think we were asked if we wanted to use this title. Incoming Prayer. Considering my death, I yield to the seventh decade, a plea bargain with mercy, paroled to the riverbank, my body pitching, a small whale now. I float in the sea-bound tannin current, calved, I breach, tail slap, I play dead, beseech. I'm in the seventh decade. Well, I'm far into it. Anyway, you don't need these asides, do you? This one, I'm going to read the following poem, which it's page 25.
Yep.
It's long,
Yeah.
and it's complicated, but I will explain to the listener or reader that it is in the form of a reversal. So you have stanza 1
Right.
ends with the wind chill 100 degrees below. And stanza 2, line by line, will in some version repeat the lines
Right.
of the first stanza going backwards. So you'll hear similar expressions, and
Right.
hopefully that'll make sense. Planet's climate reversal in spite of itself and what lies outside itself. It's raining iguanas in the in God we trust state, plopping from trees, not dead, playing dead, when temperature falls below 50. Sluggish, under 40, blood stops moving. Whatever you do, don't touch them. They have a good chance if you push them into the sun. Somebody will prod one with his pool skimmer. So allegedly you have to touch them. They thaw out like chicken on a counter or frozen water delivery bottle left outside you can blow out like hair. By no means should you collect them in your car. When they warm up, they'll crawl all over you and you'll probably freak out and crash. Like the Floridians, the iguana is not a native of Florida. Introduced to the florid fountain of youth as pets, no longer welcome by the residents who hosted them as pets. Florida, like many states, attracts strange people. Paradise entices the fraught with the lucrative. Same day it rained iguanas atop Mount Washington in our live free or die state, the temperature plunged with the wind chill 100 degrees below zero, under a biting 100 degrees, the winded state of live free or die degrees of our declining day shift iguanas reigned above Mount Washington's high and lucrative paradise, hallucinated how the fraught entices a florid imagination of weird, attractive backdrops, where pets welcomed as residents, our wonderful hosts, are no longer pests, lounge in hot springs presented as youth, not natives. Florida is a reptilian iguana, so don't lose control and crash your car. They'll warm up to you and crawl up on your lap. Ignore the by no means should you let them in your car. A mere symbol of stolen spring water from California, distributed frozen as precious chicken in certain markets, mellow out at the counter, where you'll allegedly touch discounts with a swipe. Go home and have the pool boy prod you, skimming into the sunny part together. It's only good luck. And whatever you do, touch him. Until it drops below 40 or 50, you'll feel bushed, play dead. He'll bolt soon. You'll be landing in a God we trust state. Late fall iguanas treading upscale palms. How much time? Okay, a few
Yeah.
minutes. Okay.
You got about 6 minutes left.
I'm on the page of Vistas Barcelona again. Okay, Charles, you mentioned this poem earlier, explaining a few things. It's on page 29.
Yep.
Expecting great aunts Sadie and Mamie for dinner, fond of Yorkshire pudding, and dipping sliced bread in the blood of a good beast, I await the aunts after the rain for the Last Supper. They cross the countertop where the regiment has fallen, with a search party with an assortment of friends and family and cadaver dog. The Queen crawls out a crack, and from her brocade purse, Aunt Sadie pulls a can. Mamie wrestles her for the raid, breaks 2 ribs, 1 each. I excuse myself, shuffle the ladies down the hall, with whiskey to the guest room. I mop the blood up, saving a few crumbs on an espresso saucer for Her Majesty. The army march their tiny, synchronized drums in whatever direction it is they leave the house. When they call out, I gather the aunts and pour 2 demi-tasse cups, get them awake enough to lean a good side on the table. We discuss, what about Easter dinner, lamb or ham? Lamb, Mamie yells, lamb. It seems she wants blood. Some years we go with ham. Let me see. I'll read the small hours, which you mentioned on page 32.
Yeah.
I do have to say that I have a set of greeting cards, if you want to call them that, with drawings by Louise Bourgeois, the artist. And so a lot of these phrases are taken. She has the drawings, and then when you open the card, it will say something like, you know, the small hours or unravel the torment. So I have actually taken her phrases.
Okay.
The small hours. I sing an elegy for the crickets, the missing bats, and you in a meadow, your back to the sky. We encountered one another in a time of never stopped seeking, not venturing out much because too much to touch upon. Unaware you had passed and left me to unravel the torment in the small hours. It's September, patron of sanity, its art of return. The sunset releases the stars, invades the night. Outside, small repairs in the sky. Okay. I want to read this one called Monday Morning, because when you were also asking me about the non sequiturs and how my work doesn't always follow a sequence or a narrative, you'll hear in this poem a little bit about ADHD, and people do that have ADHD really do go off on many different tangents. So perhaps that's some relationship.
Right.
Monday morning, I worry the painter can hear me talking to myself. Why am I self-conscious around him? Uncomfortable about leaving my study. He is outside the door, scraping. I don't feel this way about the contractor. I carry the air purifier in beside me, a too hot spring day. I am barefoot. I leave this poem in the middle because I have ADHD now, an excuse for everything. I am also mildly bipolar, not medium, not hot. I take the Depakote and dream I am smoking broccoli.
We have time for just one more short one, and
Okay,
good.
sure. If I have any more, I might. These look pretty long.
Well, the red cloud is.
Oh, okay, the red cloud. Yeah, this is also based on it's an ekphrastic. It's a painting that I saw someone posted online called the La Nube Roja, which is a painting by a Spanish man named David de la Heras. He has a lot of commercial work, but anyway, this really struck me. Nearing a path, the woman forces the meadow apart, her head ablaze. No afterstorm because the rains never land. Roadway alerts, keep no flame nor camp, gamble or smoke. Eyes itching from inside out. On the horizon, bloodshot clouds. Mural of graphics on wall of tender greens and blossoms extending upward. A man in camouflage is positioned amid the branches, aiming a shotgun, his arms elbowed, frozen. The woman is sweeping dirt and crumbs into a bin. She dies out a match, spit between thumb and forefinger. She works the final pull and swoop of a corn broom. Leaning against the wall, finds her paperback and picks up the story.
Wow. Well, Alicia, thank you very much. This has been a lot of fun, and I've learned a lot more about your poetry. So I selfishly have had you here to interrogate you.
Well.
But no, it's really been a great reading, a great discussion of your poetry, and good luck with this collection. I really hope you get it published, and I hope you work hard to do that. I think I mentioned to you Moonstone. Moonstone has a chapbook contest. I think it's still on. I would encourage you, to look that way. That's one option. So I have to thank you, and I have to thank our production people, Don and Alicia, who's going to be leaving us to go back home to Russia. But she has been with us for several months and helping to make Philly Loves Poetry a reality here on PhillyCAM. I can't leave without, giving honor to Moonstone Arts Center and all it does to promote the love of poetry in the city of Philadelphia on an ongoing basis. Just about every Wednesday night, there's a reading at Fergie's Pub on Sampson Street, and that's something you can go to. You can go to our website and see a lot of other things about what we're publishing, different kinds of contests. So find a way to support us. Larry and Moonstone are probably the most pivotal player in the promotion of poetry in the city of Philadelphia. So again, thank you, Alicia.
Thank you, Charles.
Thank you, PhillyCAM, for making this a reality, and we'll see you again next month.